There will be spoilers ahead. Lots of spoilers, so be careful, won't you? Howdy folks, Mike of Max Mike Movies here. You might remember that last week we started our huge 200th episode of our podcast with The Batman. We started in 1943 and we managed to get up to about 1966 or so. We ran out of time for one of our regular length shows, so we've cut this gigantic episode into 4 parts. This is part 2. The lads, of which I am one, had just started to talk about a very serious time in the Batman's history. Let's listen in.
The facts.
But now we're going to go to something much more serious. Max, where do we go next?
Okay, now this, I will admit, this one is going to be fairly short. There's not a lot of there. But of course, one of Batman's, oddly enough, longest-running appearances was in the animated series, The SuperFriends. Plus, two major appearances with another group of crime fighters, another dark, gritty collection of dynamic solver of mysteries, Scooby-Doo and the Gang. Yes, there are not one but 2. One called Scooby-Doo Meets Batman, real good title, a lot of work went into that, and The Dynamic Scooby-Doo Affair, in which, by the way, just as a minor, the Joker is voiced by none other than F Troop's Larry Storch.
Do you know who did Robin?
Yes, I do. We'll get to that.
Okay.
I'm going with the Super Friends first because there was a lot more of that. That ran in one form or another, from 1973 to 1986. Yeah, 13 years. And there was the Super Friends, and there was the all-new Super Friends Hour, Challenge of the Super Friends, World's Greatest Super Friends, then just Super Friends, The Best of the Super Friends, Super Friends, the Legendary Superpowers Show, and the Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians.
Super Friends Greatest Hits.
Yeah, Super Friends Go to Hawaii. The Super Friends were like a very watered-down version of the Justice League.
Yeah.
Most of Ted Knight did a lot of voices in it. Yeah, he did. He was sort of the narrator. Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice. The Batman in all of these, and in Scooby-Doo, was voiced by an actor named Olan Soule, who most people you will probably not remember, except as one other major part. By the way, the voice of Batman and this other part are the main things that are listed on his IMDb page. In Star Trek, Day of the Dove, he played the Klingon leader Kang.
Oh.
Yes.
Please note, as Max will later point out, that the actor in question was in fact Michael Ansara, who played Kang. No letters, please.
And if you see him without the makeup, you'll go, oh yeah, that guy. He is one of those guys like Robbie Benson, who they sort of have, oh, let's see, this week you're playing a Mexican, now you're a Native American, now you're Italian. He was sort of general ethnic looking. And Robin was voiced by none other than Casey Kasem, who I realize a lot of people don't remember anymore, but he was a fairly well-known disc jockey.
And
Shaggy.
Shaggy.
Was also it was a little awkward doing Scooby-Doo because he was also the voice of Shaggy and the voice of Alex and Josie and the Pussycats and a bunch of others. He was a major voice actor.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to say about Batman in the Super Friends. He is the most generic you'll see him. It's like the Batman of the serials. Mm. Most of the characters, most of the superheroes in the Super Friends did not have very distinct personalities. Wonder Woman was the girl, and I mean the girl.
Yeah.
Of the main characters, she was the only one. She was the only female. Aquaman, he had, I'll call my fishy friends. Yeah, trying desperately to show that Aquaman on land was useful. Superman was the big blue Boy Scout. Batman was like Superman in a different costume. Robin's job was mostly to go, gosh, you're right, Batman. Mm. That was most of them. Later, they tried to mix it up a little. In the later seasons, they started adding additional characters when someone pointed out, dude, we're coming up in the late 70s. You might want to have somebody who isn't snowy white. Mm-hmm. So they added Black Lightning, who at one point was Black Vulcan.
Yeah.
But they realized, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, Samurai and Apache Chief. Because we need an Asian guy and a Native American. And then the next year they added El Dorado. None of these characters ever were from the comic books or made it into the comic books, except Black Lightning did.
Yeah.
Although he sort of changed his incarnation. He was also the inspiration for a character called Static Shock, or Static. Who actually, I wish we were talking about that, because that was a really interesting show. Anyway.
I just have one thing to say about Samurai.
Yeah?
Domo ni hayaku.
Hayaku! Yeah. They said, here, find me a phrase in Japanese. That was it.
Here's the problem. I asked somebody, there was a friend of mine who was Japanese. She was born, raised in Japan.
She's not Japanese anymore? You said she was Japanese.
Well, I haven't talked to her in like 20-something years.
Okay.
So I assume she's still Japanese. That seems to be the way things go.
Yeah.
And I asked her once, what does this phrase mean in Japanese? Domo ni hayaku. And she just sort of looked at me, and then she started giggling, and she said, nothing.
I figured it was just gibberish. I think Apache Chief said something in I don't think it was Apache. I think it was Cherokee. But
I thought it was just, I get real big, because that's all I ever see him do is get real big.
Yeah.
I will have to say, I don't know about you, Max, I watched the heck out of the Super Friends.
Oh, so did I. And, of course, they had their sidekicks, because you have to have the young ones to bring in the kids. And they started out, for some reason, with Wendy, Marvin, and Wonder Dog.
Excuse me. It was, in fact, Wendy, Marvin, and Wonder Dog.
Excuse me. Yeah, Wonder Dog. None of these people, for some reason, Wonder Dog wore a cape. His only superpower was he talked like Scooby-Doo. For some reason, all dogs add R's to the beginning of everything.
Sure.
Yeah, Wendy and Marvin had no superpowers, no sense of survival, no common sense. They lasted about 2 or 3 seasons. Then they were replaced, of course, by Zan and Jaina, the Wonder Twins, and their pet monkey, Gleek. These guys at least had superpowers. They just didn't use them for anything.
They'd use them, but... So he could turn into things that were based on water.
And yes, she could turn into animals or birds or insects. She could turn into any living thing.
Yeah.
And all he ever did was turn into, like, a bucket of water. She'd turn into a bird.
And then she'd carry him and dump him on the villain, and that wouldn't stop him. And, oh, no, we'd best call the Super Friends, the actual stars of this show.
Yeah.
Yeah, Batman in this is particularly bland.
He really is. He has no... He doesn't need to be Batman. He could just be, pointy ear guy.
Yeah. There's literally... None of Batman's history is here at all. I think that the Joker shows up occasionally. His voice actor is not very good.
In the early parts of the Super Friends, there are no supervillains.
No.
They're usually misunderstood aliens or people with good intentions who do wrong things. Or it's an environmental crisis or something, and they deal with it later. When they get to, Challenge of the Super Friends, you end up with the Legion of Doom.
Right, sort of.
Sort of. Which, now, I have to say, I thought the Legion of Doom looked cool. Hall of Doom, which looked basically like Darth Vader's helmet, looked pretty cool. They just didn't do anything with it.
Well, so if I want to touch on something here, because we talked about the fact that the movies had to self-impose a system of ratings to keep basically the government from stepping in and telling you what you could and what you couldn't do in movies. And obviously, comics had to do the same thing, as you pointed out through the trials with Dr. Frederick Wortham and stuff. TV was going through a same sort of thing at this point. There was a group called Action for Children's Television, which I hated then and I hate now because they made all my favorite shows boring. And this is an example of that. So when you said originally it was just about misunderstood aliens and climate issues and stuff like that, that's why. There was a lot of stink about violence on shows like perfectly innocent shows like Speed Racer, where only a few people died every episode. So I really don't
Only a few.
And here's the thing. If you can remember back as a kid, Max, did that violence bother you in any way or make you go, hey, I should go out and hit somebody?
I don't believe so. I never said, hey, it'd be really cool to go out and hit somebody with a 2x4.
Yeah. So
in fact, when the violence was more like, oh, wow, that guy looks hurt. You shouldn't hit somebody in the head.
Yeah. I mean, even some of the stuff that was on the Flintstones, hitting Barney over the head with stuff. Yeah, they didn't even want that. And that's why the Super Friends, the fights during the Super Friends are really dull.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the stakes are really low.
Yeah, nope. I don't think anybody ever punches anyone.
No.
There's occasionally somebody gets picked up and thrown. Wonder Woman wraps them up in her bondage rope. Hey, you want to talk about what's his name, the guy who created Wonder Woman?
I would, except this is all about Batman.
Yeah, true.
Oh, as interesting as it is.
It is.
Hey, folks, take a look. Go looking for the...
Siri.
Yeah, because that was interesting.
That guy's got a story.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
But yeah.
This, as I say, this is a really dull version of Batman. Honestly, he fit right in with Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
He was just like, it was like, oh, look, it's Batman and Robin. And just like, oh, look, it's the Harlem Globetrotters. Oh, look, it's the Three Stooges. Oh, look, it's the Addams Family.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is Batman in name only.
Yeah.
I would say you get more of Batman from the serials than you do from this show.
I will say one thing. I remember much later, this must have been in one of the 80s incarnations, like the legendary superpowers or whatever, the world's greatest. They did an episode where they're dealing with people's fears, and Batman ends up in Crime Alley, and they talk about that's where his parents died.
Oh,
so they do bring that in.
Yeah,
they don't know what to do with it because they don't say they were shot or they don't say how they died. Apparently, maybe they just both succumbed to some terrible disease while walking through this alley. But they almost made an effort, and of course, then the show disappeared.
Oh, here's something we should have touched on in the 1966 Batman. I don't think anywhere in the show, and certainly not in the movie, do they bring up the origin of Batman.
I don't believe they ever do. We have no idea we don't know what happened to his parents.
No.
I remember as a kid thinking, are like Alfred and Aunt Harriet his parents? Is that it?
Yeah.
There's nothing. They're never mentioned at all.
Yeah, Dick Grayson has an aunt. Like, he's got family. He's just his youthful ward for reasons that we don't know. And to the best of my knowledge, Aunt Harriet exists only in the show. She was not a comic book character.
I think that's right.
But this one, if you think that a lot of people, as I said, who love Batman hate the 66 Batman because they think it doesn't represent Batman. I think this represents Batman even less.
Yeah.
Because there's no flavor to him
This
at all.
could have been any character. You could have used anyone.
He's got a Batmobile. Honestly, it looks like it couldn't corner if you paid it to. It's just this big lumpy thing.
He has a bat plane that honestly looks like a big child picked it up and threw it like a glider.
Well, you know what it looks like? It looks like it's meant to be made into a toy. Oh,
yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
To be fair, this is the time when you started getting superhero toys. So this company called Mego somehow got the licenses for everybody. And the weird thing is that they would put out Batman and Robin right next to Spider-Man and the Hulk. So you could have anybody you wanted as this pretty much cookie cutter figure with its, correct coloring and its correct outfit. And I don't know about you, I had those. I loved the Batman and Robin figures, and I wanted the Batman detection van, the Batman TV license detector van.
The Ministry of Housing.
Yeah, no, I think I had a Spider-Man, although I'd never read a Spider-Man comic. They were just fun. They were action figures. This is when you got action. G.I. Joe started that whole thing. But these were things as a kid, you could just go out and have them climb trees and stuff. It was a lot of fun.
They weren't dolls. They were action figures.
And you'd actually, I don't know about you, but I never took their clothes off. Like, I didn't like
either.
That wasn't a thing.
I don't know if you could on some of them.
Oh, yeah, you could. They were cloth. But, often with dolls, you change their outfits and stuff. And I know some people probably put Batman's outfit on the Hulk because, but whatever. Bad Hulk. Sure. But otherwise...
I think we can say goodbye to this one because it's not that interesting.
But I watched it every Saturday.
Yep, so did I. And, after the 66 Batman, we did not get a live-action Batman for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Until...
1989.
Facts.
1989. We're going to count down the top movies.
No, Casey Kasem was not involved in this.
So 1989, the interesting thing about this, so I was working at a comic book store when this was happening. And the news got out that they were doing a live-action Batman film. And at that point, Tim Burton was not so big a deal.
He only had done was Beetlejuice.
And I think Edward Scissorhands? No, maybe not.
I thought that was later.
I can't remember. But it's like, it's not he was not this household name that he would become, for good or for evil. Take your pick. And he was taking on Batman. And the word came out is that we were going to get the dark, gritty Batman, because the comics had evolved at this point. The comics, up through the 70s, we started getting people like Neil Adams, who would more be known with characters like Green Arrow and Green Lantern. But we would start getting things happening in the comics where they would do stories that were not approved by the comics code. Green Lantern, Green Arrow had, I think, a 3-issue series that dealt with drug use, which was definitely not going to get
you were never supposed to even mention drugs.
But they still released them.
And also, what happened in 1986?
What did happen in 1986? Would you tell our audience, Max?
I will. Frank Miller wrote The Dark Knight Returns.
Right, which was old Batman, but as gritty as a Batman as you had seen till that point.
It was in a lot of ways, people say it was a game changer. I had never seen anything like this.
No, at the time.
At the time, now it's pretty much, de rigueur, but...
So, for the comic side of things, one of the big deals was it was a series that was not sold on the newsstands. It was sold in the direct market, which means right to comic stores. So it wasn't being seen by Little Billy and Little Janie necessarily in the corner drugstore. And because of that, they allowed Miller to do things that they would not necessarily do otherwise. And it, too, was not approved by the comics code.
Oh, boy, was it not.
No. And this was a Batman in his... I'm going to guess near 60s, in his 60s. I'm sure they said it's been a long time.
They say he's 55.
55. And Gotham City has, quite honestly, gotten worse than it's ever got.
Yeah.
And, there will be a new Robin, but it is about as dark and gritty as that character has yet appeared. And so when they decided they wanted to make a movie, they got Tim Burton, and then Tim Burton was like, yes, I'm going to do a dark and gritty Batman, and that's what we all expected. And to be fair, at the time, that's what we felt we got. But there's some trivia for this. Oh, dear gods.
I bet there is.
This is shaved down like you would not believe. If you want to go read trivia, please, but this is the stuff I highlighted.
There's books worth.
Budget, $48 million. A few more from the 1966 version. Take, a whopping $411 million. So take that, Adam West.
Gosh, I wonder if there was a sequel or 3.
Interesting, we had no votes for this particular one, but we do have votes for the Michael Keaton.
Some of the others,
A totally different film almost happened. When Warner Brothers couldn't get Jack Nicholson to say a definite yes, they said they'd give the part to Robin Williams instead. Williams would have played it, but he was just being used as bait to get Jack to say yes, which he eventually did. Because of that incident, not only would Williams refuse to play the Riddler in Batman Forever, he wouldn't work for the WB until they apologized. Don't know if they ever did. Speaking of Jack, it must be nice, that's all I can say. Savvy actor, he got points in the film, and because of its huge take, his wallet bulged with over $60 million in take-home pay.
Yikes.
Not just for that reason, this was one of Jack's favorite roles. Besides not being able to move his head, Michael Keaton couldn't hear a thing in the Batman cowl, and as such, used that to his advantage, turning the character inward. Or so he says. Worldwide, this movie came second in earnings only to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Wow.
Billy D. Williams would return as Harvey Dent Two-Face, as his contract for this movie stipulated, but not until the Lego Batman movie.
Yeah, which was about 30 years later.
Yeah, and we'll get that. I'm pretty sure I put the same piece of trivia when I get to Lego Batman. Did this film have what it takes? Apparently, the director didn't think so. Quoted at the time, Tim Burton had this to say, quote, I liked parts of it, but the whole movie is mainly boring to me. It's okay, but it was more of a cultural phenomenon than a great movie, end quote. Well, there you go. Contrary to popular belief, the cartoonist who hands Alex Knox the sketch of Batman is not one of his creators, Bob Kane, though the sketch is drawn and signed by him. He was supposed to be in the film, but he actually was sick at that point, and they couldn't get him at the time.
Oh.
Michael Keaton, and this will shock you, was not a popular choice.
No.
50,000 fans wrote in to protest, and even one of the comic's creators, Bob Kane, had reservations.
I can't think why. Hi, what you mean Mr. Mom is going to play Batman?
Yeah,
okay.
and we're going to get to him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Much more like the original 40s Batman, this movie had a body count of 57.
I didn't know they could count that specifically, but I believe it.
They did. And really a ton more, but there's a few other movies in this little grouping, so we're going to move on to the plot. It's Batman as you've never seen him before. Dark, gritty, realistic. No, really. We see the Batman rise as a new thug in town calling himself the Joker, goes on a mad rampage. But did Batman make the Joker, or did the Joker make Batman? And what about Bruce Wayne's new hot date, Vicky Vale? Will she find out the truth of this dark Avenger? Spoiler, there's no way she couldn't. Or will she just be led into the Batcave by Alfred? The worst is yet to come. The film. Yeah, 1989. So, Max, I want to go back. We do this a lot of their movies because it does matter, I think. You saw this when it came out, right?
I did. I stood in line.
And what did you think?
When I saw it, the first time I saw it, I was kind of blown away.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, this... I had never seen a superhero movie like this. I'd never seen the only Batman movie I knew was the 66.
Right.
I do remember thinking, Batman's kind of short. I mean, the whole thing, I had been reading comic books I'd read The Dark Knight, and I really loved the image. In that, Batman is this massive, hulking figure, a slab of muscle and power. And Michael Keaton, for all his skill as an actor, and we've seen him do some really good stuff, he's not that physically imposing. Especially back then, he was kind of skinny, he was already losing his hair. I remember when he had the suit on, it was like, well, first off, that could be anybody. And when he had the suit off, I was like, I don't think that's Batman.
Or Bruce Wayne.
I thought I liked Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Jack Nicholson looked like he was having a great time.
He is giving it his all.
he really throws himself into it. But honestly, I thought Jack Palance was scarier. I thought Jack Palance should have been the main villain because, my God, that guy can just menace anybody off the screen.
I just said Jack Palance is kind of great, and he really is. He's not in the movie very long. He plays Boss Grissom, who is technically Jack Napier's, who becomes the Joker, Jack Napier's boss. And Jack Napier is getting a little on the side. And it turns out it's actually Boss Grissom's girlfriend, played by Jerry Hall, in a role that you will not remember, which I think is most of Jerry Hall's role. Ouch. Sorry. The star of this film, let's face it, is Jack Nicholson. Yeah. He's having an absolute ball. He's throwing himself into it. Apparently, I did not know this, but one of his favorite comic book characters was the Joker. He did read them as a kid. But to Tim Burton's credit, he was basically scrubbing every moving visual representation we had seen of Batman to this point and starting over from frame one. He got a very new, interesting person to do the soundtrack, somebody we hadn't seen before, at least not in this capacity, right? Because this is probably his biggest theme.
That's Danny Elfman, who basically was grafted to Tim Burton at the hip for a long time.
And I did my first note for when Max and I rewatched this was "Calm down" soundtrack, because they start off. It is hammering at you.
It is Elfmania. You dig? This is serious Danny Elfman all over. Danny Elfman is kind of the. Albert Glasser of the 80s and 90s, in that he is the man who holds you down and pummels you with music.
Yeah, although I would say that his soundtrack for Beetlejuice was almost as iconic. But this is the kind of music that when he came up with the Batman theme, it's like, oh, we can't just use this here. We're going to keep using this.
Oh, yeah, they use it in the animated series. It sticks around.
Yeah. On the other hand, one of the other things we also get, and I would not have seen this coming, is Prince. Because when I think Batman, I think Prince
does the soundtrack for this. There's at least one or two original Prince songs written just for this movie.
Yeah.
And it's odd. Honestly, I think his one, when they're in the art museum, really fits.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about anywhere else in the movie.
Yeah. But when this film was coming out, it was, as I said, I worked in a comic store. Everybody was talking about it.
It was a sensation.
All they were going to talk about. And I think at this point, across the hall from us was a movie poster store that also got scripts, and somebody got a leaked script of the film. And so we were reading it ahead of time because we couldn't stand it. We were so excited. And I wasn't even a big Batman fan, but I was just like, oh my God, we got a hold of the script. And the script felt like it was going to be this dark, gritty Batman. And we really expected that that's what it was. And at the time, because we'd just had Adam West and not really anything else, it's SuperFriends, okay.
Yeah.
This felt like the adult Batman. Now, I'm sure, Max, you've seen this since 1989. I've seen it here and there. But we did sit down and rewatch this.
Yep.
And I'm sure we all have a lot of notes. One of my first was, no one's afraid of Batman. Seriously. Nobody's afraid of Batman.
He's surprisingly unmenacing. Even the big line, his big open delivery, when he's beating up those two thugs on the rooftops and he lifts one up and the guy screams, "What are you?" "I'm Batman." And it's like, "I'm pleased to meet you.
I actually learned how to say that.
Fred Batman."
I learned how to say that exchange in French because I thought it would be funny. Qui êtes-vous? Je suis le Batman.
See, that's actually more menacing. Now, this jumps ahead when Christian Bale does it in Batman Begins. It's like, I remember when I watched that scene, I'm like, that's how you say it.
Yeah.
Because it's so... I assume he's trying to do quiet menace, but it just comes out flat. It's like, I'm Batman.
Joe, Batman, damn it. That's sort of crossing the deepers, if you will.
Yeah. And and the costume, I remember watching it and thinking, is that really practical that he has a cowl where to look up he has to actually bend backwards?
Yeah. And he can't turn side to side at all.
He can't turn his head. I liked the look.
Yeah.
It was just incredibly impractical. The Batmobile, I thought, looks very cool.
Yeah. Again, I for my money, it does not beat the one from 1966.
It also looks, because it's so long, like how the hell do you drive that in a city?
Well, and there's actually a part in the script that they couldn't really do because, and they did this on Mythbusters, actually, where the idea was you couldn't corner at 90 miles an hour, especially in that car. So it had this little grappling hook shoot out, grab a fire hydrant, and then it would go around the corner. And it was supposed to happen at 90 miles an hour. I think it happened at 30. Even then, it was a problem for the actual car because it just was not meant to do that. And spoiler, the folks at Mythbusters proved, you would snap the cable every time. Every time.
Yeah. Well, the Batman's bat cables are magic. They're basically made of, super hardium or ultra strongium because they can also lift two people without snapping.
Unless you lie about your weight.
Yeah, but the cable didn't snap.
That's true. That's true.
It was the motor in the grappling hook gun couldn't handle it. Yeah. Again, I do want to talk about the performances.
Yes, let's do
that. With that. Michael Keaton tries. Oddly enough, there is one scene where he almost gets interesting, and honestly, it's when he's turning into Beetlejuice.
Almost gets interesting.
He does. Most of the time, he's really dull. And it's when he's confronting Jack Napier. He's confronting the Joker in Vicky Vale's apartment, and he's like, "You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get..." And for a second, you say, "Oh, wow. That could have been really interesting if he had shown Batman had this barely leashed rage in him."
Yeah.
That's the only time we see it, and it's there and it's gone.
And what's really weird is that they will choose Michael Keaton for another part in a superhero film decades later, at which he excels. And that's when he plays the Vulture in the Spider-Man film. And boy, I was afraid of him there.
He was really scary. He was wonderfully menacing, but not, again, he didn't have to do the Batman I'm huge thing.
Which he
wasn't. It was just the intensity. He looks
bigger in that than he does in this.
Yeah, and it was the intensity. And honestly, he looks better with less hair.
I never understood the choice of Michael Keaton. I do know some people who really like Michael Keaton's Batman, and that's fine. But to me, just the history of the character, what he's supposed to represent, the fact that he's literally supposed to scare people, I don't see it here. There's like the first characters we see, Don't Leave Home Without It. Those two, they're actually gibbering at the end. They have to be taken away to the funny farm because they're so scared of the bat. And I'm like, Well, I'm glad you told us that, because otherwise I'd think he just had a stroke or something.
Yeah, it's not frightening. I don't get that.
The two Jacks are great. Jack Palance and Jack Nicholson are...
Pair of Jacks. They're wonderful, and they wish they'd had more scenes together because they're so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are my number one guy.
Apparently that was ad-libbed. Good for you, Jack Nicholson. That worked great. The guy who's playing Harvey Bullock, who's not Harvey Bullock, but
he's
would
flaccid.
visually become Harvey Bullock. I think he does a really good job. His voice is a little low to hear, but he plays his part really well. It's tiny. The guy playing Alexander Knox is
Robert Wool.
Yeah,
he's fine. He's fine. He was good in Bull Durham. He's a stand-up.
Yeah.
He used to have a show called Arliss. He can be funny, but he's forgettable.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Kim Basinger as, I'm a hard-hitting photojournalist. No, you're not.
Sure you are. Do you even own a camera?
And she spends an awful lot of this movie fainting.
Yeah, and her hair changes texture a lot, which is weird. Like now it's curly, now it's straight, now it's curly, now it's straight. Let's be fair to her. I don't know that much about her as an actor. It's not a very good part.
No.
She's a damsel in distress. She figures out it's Batman. No, she doesn't. Alfred literally opens up the clock, and there it is.
But to be fair, Vicky Vale was not an interesting character in the comic book. She was basically a blonde Lois Lane without Lois's gumption.
Yeah,
she was just a clone.
Who else is in this film? Not much of anybody. We get Billy D. Williams for 5 seconds.
Yep, Billy D. Williams is like, oh wow, this looks cool. Oh, and he's gone. He gets 3 lines, and he's done. Michael Gough is pretty good as Alfred.
He's of that. I'm going to guess. I don't know this because I don't know his other parts. Apparently, he's well known for horror films. I was like, really? But he's of that generation of British actor that even when they're slumming, they're just going to be good because of their training and their background. He doesn't have a lot to do, but what he does, he brings a very different dimension to Alfred.
Yeah. He brings the movie class.
Well, but he's obviously a lot more relied upon than Alan Napier was back in 1966. That has something to do with Alan Napier. Alan Napier, which kills me, was like 6'5". He was gigantic, and of course, he had to sort of hunch over all the time because
so he wouldn't tower over the others. Yeah.
One of the biggest characters in this film, which we all loved at the time, and I'm going to say doesn't really hold up, is the architecture. That is one interesting city. It's basically like a bunch of giants wandered into an urban landscape, would pick up buildings or bridges or stuff, and then the sun came up and they turned to stone. It's really cool. It doesn't make any sense.
No, logically it doesn't work architecturally. It does look awesome. It's very Gothic, very sort of this weird combination of Gothic and, I don't know, Art Nouveau or Art Deco.
It's Deco. It's get it Gothic, Gotham. Okay.
Yeah.
My note on Keaton was he just doesn't fit the Johnny Bravo suit. It never did really fit right in the shoulders. That's a deeper.
But it's not his movie. It's Nicholson's. The Joker is just even the things. I'm the world's first fully functional homicidal artist.
Yeah.
It's like that's really good. That's really clever.
Now, so I did a little bit of research for this because this is the movie I had to do. And Tim Burton had never read a Batman comic. When he did, he went back to the old stuff. Oh. And when I reread some of the earliest, like Batman or Detective 27, Batman 1 and stuff, it's like, you know what? On that level, this film actually does feel like Batman. It feels a lot like the 30, except for the lack of shooting. Although Batman does kill people. And all of these 80s, 90s films, there's even, we'll get to this later, there's one point where he shoves a bomb down some guy's pants. But in a way, this is doing what they asked Tim Burton to do. Take this iconic character back to his origins and depict him the way he should be, except he didn't read the current stuff with dark and gritty, although at the time, again, we all felt it was. Mm-hmm. It was more adult and stuff. It was
certainly more than, because this was the first vision of Batman on the screen, on the movie screen we'd seen since '66.
Yeah. But we get this weird plot where Joker's come up with Smilex, and it causes people to start laughing, grin uncontrollably, and then pitch over backwards.
Which is from the comic book. He had a toxin that did that.
Which is fine, which is totally fine. I actually even think the way he goes about it was really interesting, although they don't spend a lot of time on it. It's a multi-part formula.
Yeah.
So depending on which beauty products you use, you might mix them together.
In combination, yeah.
But strangely, this assumes that all of the personal hygiene products for Gotham City are made in Gotham City.
Yeah.
So
Gotham made.
Yeah. So okay, sure. I've come back to this before, but if he had been the right age, somebody I would have liked, maybe not for this movie, but for Batman, would have been a vintage era Gabriel Byrne. Dear gods, does that man have intensity and the gravitas? He could have done the Nolan Batmans again, although he's too old for it. This Batman wants to give up his secret ID really quickly.
Yeah.
He like there's literally like the first dinner. He goes over to after the first dinner, he goes to Vicky Vale's apartment, and you see him going, "I'm Batman. I'm Batman."
He's trying to tell her, and he can't. Yeah.
And then Joker shows up, and there's also some shots in this film that are just like really groan-inducing. He's in this thing called the Bat Wing, which of course has to be shaped like the bat symbol because otherwise, whatever. And there's one point where it literally flies in front of the moon.
Yep.
And it's like
forms
whatever.
the bat logo. It's like, oh, really? And boy, does this Batman like to pose.
Yeah.
He does that a lot. A lot of the stand, Kirby pose, fists at your sides.
Billow,
yeah.
And before we get anything, yes, we know that Kirby was not an artist on Batman.
I know.
I do also, as the film gets on, the film gets goofier. There's later in that Batwing, Joker brings down Batman.
Yeah, with a pistol. Yeah.
Okay.
That bothered me a lot.
And then there's Gotham Cathedral, which basically literally couldn't exist because it's too tall and narrow. And
yeah, it'd fall over.
Yeah, and it was just a legality waiting to happen. At the time, though, I loved it. This is great.
Knocked me out.
I actually got worried because they were selling rubber Batman outfits, and I kept telling customers, "Is like, how long is it going to be before people start fishing Batman out of the river?"
Seriously, or just finding people lying on the sidewalk in the summer, dead of heat prostration.
Yeah. I do have one thing I'd like to ask you about Jack Nicholson and the Joker. Do you think his prosthetics work?
Almost. I think the cheek things that are supposed to make the permanent smile, they look a little fake.
Yeah.
I think the makeup I thought worked well, but the prosthetics, again, talk about an iconic sequence is when he's taking the bandages off. He's doing the gesture, "Give me the mirror."
Yeah.
That's that nail. But yeah, they look odd.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're necessary. Jack Nicholson has a very mobile face, and honestly, his smile is creepy enough without the prosthetics.
Yeah.
I think it was unnecessary.
It's like Willem Dafoe as the Goblin.
It's scarier without the Green Goblin mask.
Yeah. So very quickly, we have 3 more in this series.
Yeah.
I think at the time it did exactly what it needed to do. Batmania was bigger than ever.
Oh, yeah.
But I think in general, if you look back, I don't think it retains any of that dark and grittiness. It actually comes off as kind of goofy.
They just get sillier and sillier.
Yeah. Speaking of which.
Yeah.
Next up, Batman Returns.
Yeah.
And we have 2 poll question answers for this one. Poll question. Dr. Rebecca Pelkey chose Keaton's Batman, specifically this movie, in her comments. Quote, "I've always been partial to Michael Keaton, though I haven't seen the newest iteration yet. It came out when I was in high school, and I felt, at the time, it was dark and loud and colorful and subversive even, in ways I hadn't yet encountered. And a little bit silly, too. Plus that cast, Michelle Pfeiffer, Danny DeVito, Christopher Walken, cool beans. Thanks, Becca." I agree. A second voice, this one from up north, belongs to Vince, our snowy cousin from Canada. Not really a cousin.
Good day.
He posted this on the website, quote, "For films, I have to say my favorite is Batman Returns. I don't love Keaton's Batman, but Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer really stand out for me, as well as the beep, pun intended, storyline. The idea that anyone who would dress up in a costume or to fight or perform crimes must have some sort of mental illness to pull it off worked for me and put Batman in the same box as those he was fighting against. One of Burton's out there films that I think worked as a more twisted comedy than anything else." End quote. Thanks for that, Vince, and you can take extra bucks for using the site.
Yep.
Trivia.
Facts.
Budget. Well, this would take a true detective to figure out, but somewhere between 65 and 80 million. That's, Take. Well, it's still good, but it's only 267 million.
Still technically a success.
Not nearly the pull of the number one film in this series. Whatever you do, make sure the penguins are happy. They did use real penguins, though the only readily available birds were in England. They not only flew the birds over in a refrigerated plane,
First class.
The entire set was cooled down to 35 degrees.
Oh,
they
Lord.
were given constant fish and ice as well as a bodyguard.
Well, everyone knows penguins are huge divas.
Their way of saying thank you, most of the birds mated during production. Eggs were laid when they returned to England. Happy penguins mean happy filmmakers.
Hey.
So there you go. Not only were no animals harmed in the making of the film, new ones were born. You don't see that too often.
Yep, penguins are a bit smelly, cute, and utterly delicious. Anyway.
I doubt it. Michael Keaton made $11 million for this time out as Batman, so good for him.
Yep.
The original posters made for buses and subway terminals, especially the ones featuring Catwoman, were being stolen at such a rate that police officers were often sent to guard them.
Jeez.
Yeah. Catwoman's catsuits were not only vacuum formed to Michelle Pfeiffer's body, which often resulted in her getting lightheaded if in them too long, they cost $1,000 apiece.
Whoa.
60 were needed for the total shoot.
Good Lord.
This I did not know, actually. This was texted to me by a non-listener, my partner Tyler. This was the breakout role, somehow, for fan favorite Doug Jones. His part, Thin Clown. Remember him? Of course you do.
Thin Clown. Sure, he was that thin guy in the clown suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael Keaton. Remember him? He's
Not
never
really.
even watched this movie. According to him, he only took the part as he needed the money for a real estate deal. And you know what? Good for you, Michael.
All right.
Why not?
At least he's honest about it.
Why did none of the supporting characters, except Alfred and Commissioner Gordon, appear in this movie? It seems that Tim Burton really, really, really doesn't like to make direct sequels, and as such, characters such as Vicky Vale were left in the cold. Believe it or not, at the time of his death, the Penguin is supposed to be 33 years old, the same age as, well, you know. And lots more, but again, we got a lot of bats to cover.
Yeah.
The plot.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Batman returns, again, for the first time. Not one, but two evildoers face our Men in Black. Man in Black.
Yeah.
Catwoman, the Penguin... Yeah, I know, Johnny Cash.
Fell into a burning bat of fire.
Catwoman, the Penguin, and Max Schreck. Oh, wait, that's three. Well, we see the origin of Catwoman and the Penguin, both of whom hate Batman for stuff and reasons. And Max Schreck is an evil businessman. Together, without a sub, can they defeat the Dark Knight? Yeah.
C for Catwoman?
The film.
So, I want to get this out of the way real quick.
Yeah.
There is some really weird mythology going on here. Some really weird
Yeah, there's some very
references.
odd echoes. You're talking about the opening with the penguin, right? The Dark Moses thing.
Not least of which is that apparently the Penguin's father is Pee Wee Herman, but never mind.
Yeah, that's pretty weird.
But, yeah, Max, do you want to talk about this?
Okay. I remember somebody writing an article for the New Yorker. No, sorry, the New York Times. It turned out to be was like the niece of one of the editors, saying how the entire movie is anti-Semitic.
Okay.
I don't really buy that. Now, the opening is, the penguin is born and he's hideous, and the parents, because apparently they want to, we don't know why, stuff and reasons, they abandon him by throwing his basket into the river a la Moses.
Right.
And it drifts down among the reeds. But instead of being found by Pharaoh's wife, is found by the next best thing, some penguins.
Because, of
which
course,
is clearly...
The river in Gotham City runs directly into the sewers and then into the zoo.
Which is, the way, like you do, like they all do. And, of course, in literary history, penguins are often allegory for Egyptians. I have a degree in English. You have to agree with me.
I might go so far to say is that the ancient Egyptians didn't even know penguins existed.
I would think they didn't. But, yeah, it's a very odd bit.
Well, now here's the thing: is I actually felt that same way. I felt that the Moses reference, for one thing, it doesn't even make any sense because, of course, Moses would eventually become a hero of his people and a leader of his people.
Well, he became a hero of the Penguins and a leader of the Penguins.
So
let my penguins go.
Yes, that famous Jew, Charlton Heston.
Penguin.
Well, and also, okay, so I'm not Jewish. I see the Moses thing, and it is a large hammer falling on the audience's head. And of course, one of the things they decide to do, which they have done before, to be fair, is to magnify certain facial characteristics of the character.
Well, he does have a very big nose.
You know, it's going to be 3 fingers across your face. You don't shut up. Okay. He's got hands like flippers, and this is an actual medical condition. And good thing he showed up. Like, good thing he didn't show up at the tiger pit, right?
Seriously.
Right?
It's
like, you're not
snack.
one of us. Yeah. So he just happens to look like a penguin, and that's why his parents dump him in the river, and then he ends up with the penguins, whatever.
It's very weird. It doesn't make any sense.
It's not for me to say, I guess, because I'm not Jewish. To me, it feels like they're trying to make very stereotypical, annoying, dumb Jewish commentary here. Just not about the people, just about the looks.
Yeah, they might have been.
And I don't see the point of it because it doesn't have anything to do with the character.
Yeah.
And then we get Danny DeVito, who is... Actually, here's a question for you. In the confines of the script, do you think Danny DeVito's doing a good job?
Yeah, I think he is. He again is throwing... He's leaving it all out on the field. He is just throwing himself into it. I just think it's a very odd interpretation of the character.
Yeah.
The whole thing with the Penguin from the beginning was he was basically an aristocrat.
Right.
He was from a rich family, but his whole thing was a veneer of respectability.
Yes, Sir Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah, Lord Pee Wee Herman. Yeah.
Who has no lines.
No, he has no lines. He does, by the way, show up in whatever that was, Gotham, that TV show that was on a few years ago, playing the Penguin's father.
Oh,
yeah.
There you go. He ends up hating the people of, above, which is understandable if you grew up literally in the sewer with the penguins, like you do.
Yeah, sure. Penguins, well known for living in sewers.
But the character's disgusting.
Yeah, he's gross.
There is nothing about the character that is in any way appealing. And he decides to start taking on the wealthy of Gotham City because they're the worst offenders as far as he's concerned. And, of course, maybe he remembers his parents. He seems to not know who his parents were, which is a plot point.
We don't know if that's true or not, yeah.
But he hates Max Schreck, a character made just for the film. And, boy, what a great name, because that name...
Well, you know where that name is. That's a tribute.
Is it?
Max Schreck was the German actor who played the very first vampire. He played Count Orlok in Shadow of the Vampire.
But which still has absolutely no bearing on this film.
Nope.
We have Christopher Walken playing Max Schreck. And I didn't look up his name, but the guy who's playing Chip, his son, I believe was Butterfinger in Hudson Hawk.
I looked him up.
He doesn't have many lines, but he is totally doing Christopher Walken when he talks, and it's hilarious.
Yep. Dad, what's the problem? Why are you talking like that, son? What do you mean?
Do I talk like that? I never noticed. He does. And Walken...
I got to say, I think it's a waste of Christopher Walken.
Well, he has nothing to do.
Christopher Walken is at his best when he gets to be crazy, when he gets to go over the top and just show that terrifying rage in him, or if he's going to do comedy, or if he's going to dance. He really can dance. He doesn't get to do anything. It's like, waha, I am stealing electricity and making the thing and doing the thing, and ha ha ha, twirl, twirl. No one will find...
He has this plan to build this giant electricity generating plant in Gotham, of course, getting funded by Gotham City to do it. And everyone who looks at this keeps going, we have an energy surplus. Why do we need this? It's like, no, you don't understand. I'm looking to the future. And it's like, okay. And then Bruce Wayne shows up and says, what's with this thing you're doing? It's like, it is for the future, Bruce. I thought you, of all people, would know. And basically his plan makes sense to nobody but himself. Yeah. And what he's going to do is eventually suck power out of the system and then sell it back at a higher price. But And so his plan gets derailed by the Penguin, who shows up and is basically trying to threaten him and his family and everybody. And he basically says, "Oh no, I have an idea. I'm going to make you mayor because you're so charismatic." What? And the sad thing is, and I didn't remember this at the time, it's a plot right out of the 1966 Batman show, because there is a couple of episodes
where Penguin runs for mayor. That's right. Vote Penguin.
Yeah, and so he decides to play it up as a sob story. They fudge this whole thing where this explosion is happening and the Penguin saves the mayor's son. And now everyone loves the Penguin, except you sit there and every time anybody's dealing with the Penguin and they're like, "Oh, you're so wonderful," and blah, blah, blah. And then he like spits up this black gunk or he says
bites someone's
horrible.
Nose off. Or...
Yeah, and they're just like, "Oh, well, he's just like that. We still love him." And it's like, you don't believe it. There's
no
God, reason
don't you understand?
This guy.
He's Donald Trump. He is. He's a proto-Donald Trump. I think Trump looked at that and said, this is a great idea. It's going to be huge.
Well, he does have the little hands.
Yeah, he does have the tiny little flipper hands.
So, yeah, I think Danny DeVito is doing a good job with what is very obviously a weird part.
Yeah.
I don't get the Penguin. I don't get his depiction. I don't get... I mean, they really go
It's
out
a
of the way
strange choice. It really is.
But we also have
a
new Catwoman. We have Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yes, we do.
I checked. That's how you pronounce your name. Pfeiffer.
It is not.
Also, just real quick, one of my favorite character actors, Vincent Schiavelli, is in this. I love anything Vincent Schiavelli
Vincent Schiavelli rules. He's been in literally everything.
Yeah. But we have Catwoman, and we have an origin of Catwoman. Finally, they've explained right down to the last detail how one becomes Catwoman. Now, I'll let you know in case you haven't seen the film.
Yeah.
You become Catwoman by being pushed out a window, hitting the ground, dying, and then a bunch of cats come around and meow at you.
That brings you back to life.
Yeah, and you're a cat now.
I will. You got to give this movie credit over the monstrosity that was the Halle Berry Catwoman movie.
I didn't see it.
She doesn't come back with superpowers.
No.
She was an athlete before. She knew martial arts. And now she's just, crazy.
Well, she was a secretary.
Yeah, but she was also an athlete. She talks about beating some guy at tennis.
Yeah, but she's that... It's Michelle Pfeiffer with her hair slightly mussed up and glasses, so she's the ugly girl, right?
It is, as they say, as Dorothy Parker said, Hollywood's idea of an ugly girl is a beautiful girl with glasses.
Yeah, and that's about it. So then she turns into Catwoman, who is obviously not all right in the head, which is fine because she fell 20 stories to her death. But we don't know anything about her motivation other than a vague revenge
She's
fantasy.
Angry at the world. She's pissed at the world, and she's going to take it out on anybody.
Yeah,
and she wants revenge on Max Schreck because he kind of murdered her.
Only kinda by directly actually pushing her out the window. I don't get her really as a character at all. It has nothing to do with I think Michelle Pfeiffer's performance, or is that performance?
I think it's Michelle Pfeiffer's
performance. Okay.
Yeah.
I think her performance is actually really interesting. I like that level of I don't quite know what the heck is going on. I don't like the I'm magical and you can kill me 7 times and I'm fine, because that's
but the way she portrays it, that's sort of like she's completely lost her mental balance and has no idea how to get it back, and she is in effect just reacting.
Well, and she's got this really interesting, not only manicness to her, but this frailty. And it's a really cool dichotomy that I have not seen in this character before or since. And I actually really did like her performance of anybody's in this film. And there's a lot of people. There's not enough scenery for all the people in this film.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, no piece of scenery goes unchewed.
Yeah, except for Michael Keaton, who's
who's doing the same thing.
I forgot.
Right.
So there's, and they do something that basically I wish Hollywood would stop doing, and that's pretending it's winter, because there's nothing that looks more like fake snow than fake snow.
Yeah.
Batman in this film sets someone on fire.
Yes, he does. Dumps a bomb down somebody's pants.
Yeah, it's just, this is not, there's no code against killing Batman.
No, there is not at all. I mean, hell, in the last one, in the first Batman, he sends the Batmobile in to blow up a chemical plant where we see there are a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. We have the Red Triangle Gang, who also has no motivation and actually feels more like a dance troupe than anything else. We have way too many villains. There's just too much going on.
There's too much. There's the evil circus.
And to give you an idea of the depth of the Penguin, and please excuse me for saying this, is when he meets up with Catwoman, his line is, and I quote, just the pussy I've been looking for.
Yeah.
Really? The gadgets are even more out there than they were in the first film. It has a James Bond ending with no real depth, with all this giant set blowing up.
Yeah.
But honestly, it commits one of the biggest sins of an action film. It's dull.
It is. A lot of it is really dull. The scenes with Batman and Catwoman are cool. Penguin doesn't really do much. I mean, he menaces.
Sometimes with Selina and Bruce.
Yeah.
Because they are very different when those two are those pairs are different, and I liked that. Like, she changes a lot. And Michael Keaton's there. She changes a lot whether she's got the mask on or not.
Yeah.
And so I think she's really trying with what is otherwise a not very good part. Do you remember? You saw, I'm sure, when it came out.
Yeah.
Do you remember your feelings at the time?
I thought it was a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Danny DeVito. I like Michelle Pfeiffer. I don't know what Christopher Walken was doing there. I remember thinking, that was a real waste of Christopher Walken. Even then, I thought that. And I thought, well, Batman's getting less interesting. How did they manage that?
Yeah. And it can be hard, because the hero is often the more boring of the two characters, and the villains get to have all the fun.
Yeah.
And Keaton's not having any fun. He's having a nice real estate deal. That's what he's having.
I remember also thinking, why did they have to bring in two villains?
Yeah,
a question I would be asking over and over again.
3, really. And they had to invent one of those.
True.
I don't remember liking it much either. I never liked the Penguin. He was just gross. I didn't see the point of him. I don't know why anybody's following him. Even the Penguins, who inexplicably give him a funeral at sea.
A penguin Viking. Yes, and also he's willing to sacrifice them in suicide penguin runs.
Yeah.
That just was absurd. And it
also
just went beyond goofy into just, oh, come on.
Yeah, a little grunkle stand there.
Yeah.
I don't think this film in any way really reflects its times.
Not
I don't
really.
remember the 90s
It certainly
feeling.
it doesn't reflect the comic book at all. It doesn't even reflect the old sensibilities of the comic book.
No, and Batman, we do so little with him in this film. He's, in the title, but that's kind of about it. We're not exploring anything with Batman. It's just like, let's throw some more villains on the screen and see what happens. And of course, you give Christopher Walken, he doesn't get to play a named villain, really. Like, I would rather have seen him as the Riddler. Oops, spoiler. Than we see later on. But yeah, you're right. He's wasted. So a lot of talent, not a lot of results.
Yep.
And I'm going to put that squarely on the shoulders of Tim Burton.
I think so.
Mike again, just breaking in on Mike and Max. That wasn't weird. We have to cut things short because this episode will go on for 2 more episodes. So tune in next week for the next part, the 3rd part of episode 200 of Max Mike Movies.
This has been a co-production of The Voice of Max and The Movie Wrench.